The state of Louisiana is home to a significant number of chemical and industrial plants. One specific area of major concern in environmental justice circles is Cancer Alley, also known as the Chemical Corridor, which runs from New Orleans to Baton Rouge within the span of 100 miles. This corridor contains one of the highest concentrations of petrochemical facilities in the Western Hemisphere, as it houses about 130 distinct industrial plants along the Mississippi River. This region alone accounts for about 25% of the nation's total petrochemical production. The placement of these facilities is significant not only because of the sheer amount of them, but also because of their strategic placement amongst the communities up and down the Mississippi. An overwhelming amount of these communities and towns are comprised of predominantly black and low income populations, which is what has made this such a popular and pressing case for environmental justice in the past few decades. Historically, many of the communities along the Mississippi have comprised of a significant population of African Americans whose ancestors were once enslaved on the sugarcane plantations of this area. By the mid 20th century, many of these large plantations were bought up by petrochemical companies who were eager to take advantage of the area's lax environmental and labor regulations, huge tax exemptions, and prime riverside access. Many of these lax regulatory practices were encouraged by the local and state governments for the sake of generating revenue. One such example would be the Louisiana Stream Control Commission, which operated from 1949 to 1979. This group was known for issuing waste discharge permits to the chemical industry with very little oversight. The group was known for asking few questions and rarely turning down an application. This reflects the significant degree of power and influence of the petrochemical and chemical industries in Louisiana. The state of Louisiana ranks among the top states in per capita production of toxic waste, as well as in the amount of hazardous chemicals discharged into its water, air, and soil. In some studies, the state is regarded as the most polluted in the nation, while also ranking 47th out of all states in terms of the overall health of its residents. It has been debated for decades what the actual health implications are for residents who live along this corridor, but there have been a number of studies and research conducted within the last 20 years which demonstrates that Louisiana residents who live in close proximity to these petrochemical plants are at a higher risk for certain health problems. Sociological and demographic research has also been conducted to confirm that the distribution of these plants is racially and economically biased. One study found that the mean cumulative cancer risk for residents in Cancer Alley was 45.8 per million, in comparison to 30.3 and 37.1 per million, which were the state and national averages. This statistical evidence shows a risk level significantly higher than the average and supports the theory that these communities are at an elevated risk of exposure. Another study conducted discovered that residents in southern Louisiana who live within 1 mile of a chemical facility have a 4.5 times greater odds of developing lung cancer than those living further away. This supports local testimony of residents suffering from elevated rates of cancer, skin inflammation, severe respiratory issues, and other health threats. In terms of examining these issues from an environmental justice standpoint, it is important to highlight the role of race and class in terms of the distribution and proximity of these plants to certain communities. Numerous studies demonstrate that low-income communities and people of color deal with greater health and environmental risk burdens than the greater society at large. Public policies and certain industry practices provide the benefits for whites while shifting the costs and consequences to people of color. The racial makeup of Cancer Alley is 55% white and 40% black, while the state average is 64% white and 32% black, respectively. Even further, the national racial makeup of the country is 75% white and 12% black. A total of 79 census tracts in Jefferson, St. John the Baptist, East Baton Rouge, and New Orleans parishes along this corridor are made up of at least 90% black residents, and most of these tracts also report exceptionally low household incomes. In a case study conducted in the St. James Parish, it was discovered that these industrial and chemical plants were located in areas with the lowest average household income, the lowest educational attainment, and the highest percentage of African Americans. Countywide, 70.6% of the total minority population in St. James Parish live within 1 kilometer of a polluting facility compared to only 23.11% of whites. Over 755,000 tons of air pollution were released in St. James Parish in 2015. The top 5 chemicals released were ammonia, methanol, styrene, ethylene, and benzene. 38,200 pounds of water pollution were also released from various plants with high percentages of ammonia, zinc, and nickel present in these wastewaters. Not only are the residents of these communities plagued by a plethora of health issues, many of them also notice significant changes in wildlife behavior and vegetation. Many of them lament that their gardens of produce no longer grow to their full potential, while also noticing that local flora and fauna have begun to appear dull, almost as if lacking in chlorophyll. They also note behavioral changes in certain animals, as well as the disappearance of certain species such as toads, frogs, birds, and grasshoppers. Some also refuse to eat fish from the Mississippi as they claim the animals are full of oil once cut open. Fortunately, as environmental justice issues become more mainstream, many of these residents have started to fight back against these companies. For example, the residents in Reserve, Louisiana recently traveled to Japan in June of 2019 to confront the company Danka for its polluting of their community. Residents in St. James Parish have also been mobilizing for years and are currently fighting the building of 3 new plants within their parish. As more and more cases of environmental harm and environmental crime come to the forefront, it is our duty as citizens to support these cases as they become mainstream and to use our voices to support those who may be the most marginalized among us.